Good afternoon. I'm here with my guest, Brad Rose, poet, and I'm glad that you can be here this afternoon, Brad.
Thanks very much for having me.
Okay.
Really honored.
Now, Brad Rose was born and raised in Los Angeles and lives in Boston. He's a sociologist and author of a collection of poetry and flash fiction, Pink X-Ray by Big Table Publishing. Hi, Robin, out there. And the new books of poems. He has three new books of poems: Momentary Turbulence, Word in Edgewise from Savannah Barbara Press, another friend of ours here in Somerville, and Detonations from Nixus Matt, are forthcoming, and that is based in Allston. 4 times Brad's nominated for a Pushcart Prize, and twice nominated for the Best of the Net Anthology. He has appeared in the Los Angeles Times, the American Journal of Poetry, Folio, Decomp, Lunch Ticket, the Baltimore Review, Boston Literary Magazine, Right Hand Pointing, and many others. His story, Desert Motel, appears in Best Microfiction 2019. Oh, excuse me, Brad. I was going to ask you, Brad, from what I read of your work, it is most decidedly offbeat. There are, prose bursts of sort of dysfunctional people. I mean, is that a fair characterization? Tell me about your work.
Yeah, I think the characters in the poems are often pretty hard-scrabble folks who've suffered a wee bit in their lives, and who are this odd mixture of kind of innocence and kind of sometimes maliciousness. But they're also striving to navigate these different systems in the world, and I think they do that oddly successfully. But I think in their lives there are these moments where they don't exactly comprehend what's going on, but they do the best they can to figure out how to do what they can. So, yeah, I think these are really character-focused, essentially prose poems. I sometimes write short fiction, but it's primarily.
And you told me you said you sounded affected when you try to write. Well, that's honest. I mean,
Yeah. No, I've had some. The last, 8 years, I've primarily focused on prose poetry, and when I try to do lineated poems, it sounds artificial to me and pretentious. So I steer away.
Yeah, I remember I was talking with a colleague of mine, and he was saying he was looking at a poem, and he says, "The trees beckon me." He says, "Who the hell talks that way?" And I mean, it does seem, archaic, and sometimes that can happen, I guess. You're a sociologist for many years, sort of more of the scientific method, but you make a study of people, and you just told me you interview people.
Right.
So I imagine this sort of can be applicable to your poetry, or has been.
A lot of the work that I do incorporates things that I've heard or addresses issues that are important to people that I have some kind of connection to. It involves, people I've known and acquaintances, or people that are in the environment, and I'm constantly listening to speech in the world and incorporating that. I take notes and.
I often the interviewees sort of conglomerates of your poems?
It's not really the folks I so much interview. Occasionally, it's more stuff I overhear in cafes, on the radio, on the street.
Well, I mean, there's a bunch of gun lovers, sort of gun star-crossed lovers. There's a guy who's paranoid and sort of puts a close watch on himself, and there's all these.
They're odd characters. They're very.
Have you met a lot of odd characters in your life? I mean, you've lived in a pretty eclectic life.
Well, I think if you piece aspects of different folks together. It's a way of getting at something that's quite real. And the short answer is yes, I've met some odd characters, but my characters are not friends of mine per se. You know, they're constructs.
Okay.
But I think they get at something that's very real and important, kind of in American life, frankly.
What's that? I mean, for
Well,
instance.
I think that there are people who live in a lot of distress of different kinds, who don't have a lot of means, and who are figuring out how to navigate these different social systems, and those people appear in my poems. And some of
And
them
those
are.
and you do work for nonprofits, so that's also, yeah.
Right, right. So, you know, and because I've done a lot of different jobs, I've met a lot of different kinds of people who've made an impression on me, excuse me, and, you know, I'll draw on experiences from 30 years ago that I think are valuable and can help compose these folks.
Now you started, where'd you study poetry originally?
I have, from a life long ago in another century, mid-century, I have a degree in English literature from UCLA.
Okay. And did you write poetry then?
I wrote a bit, yeah. As I was studying, I was somewhat overwhelmed, but
Also,
well, it's hard to go head to head with the masters,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, yeah.
And so, I think the writing I've been doing the last 10 years is giving myself a kind of license to do it the way I think it should be done, and yeah, I think that's.
did you write poetry? But you didn't.
Yeah, I wrote a bit, but not a lot.
Yeah.
Not a lot when I was in college.
All right, but so then you said you took a 30-year. In some interview I read that you took a 30-year hiatus from writing.
Yeah, yeah.
What brought you back? Why the need to come back?
That's a really good question, and I don't know the answer. I wish I did. I think there were things that were happening in my life that I did write a little bit about, and then there were things that I had kind of imagined about characters, and that began to open up another way of thinking about poetry for me, which is the prose poem form, and that seemed like the best way for me to proceed, you know. So
Was poetry ever therapeutic, catharsis for you at all?
Not so much. I enjoy it. I like the process of writing. I like
Creating it.
I like creating it. I like using everyday speech in a different kind of format. I deal a lot with kind of juxtapositions of different kinds of observations of these characters, and that's enjoyable. I don't think of it as therapeutic per se, but it's fun.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you know, we should have fun in this.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
was going to ask you another question. Oops, sorry about that.
Sure.
You know, some people, some writers that I've spoken to, thank you. Some writers that I've spoken to have said that it's almost like they don't feel good if they don't write. It almost has an obsessional
Yeah,
quality
yeah.
to it. I mean, has it become?
It's not obsessional, but I write every day.
Okay, and
Yeah.
do you have a particular time or whenever?
I don't. I mean, I like writing. I write midday when I have the time available. I write in the morning when I can. But no, it's, you know, I write when I just try to write every day. That's the key for me.
And who do you consider mentors? I mean, for your writing. I mean, that's a big question.
It's a really big question. When I was in college, I mean, models for me were people like Anne Sexton and Merwin. But I don't think you'd see any of that in my poetry now.
No, it doesn't seem so.
It just isn't the case. And
So, as a young poet, you would be writing. Would you be imitative of Sexton and Merlin?
Merwin.
Merwin, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Merlin.
Yeah, Merlin. I like that. Yeah, I would a bit, but even then I was trying to figure out a way to do this that was, you know, my own, And
So you found your voice finally. Sometimes it takes a while to find,
yeah,
even
yeah,
30
yeah.
years, right?
50 years, Yeah, it takes a while, I think. And I think part of it is giving oneself license to say, yeah, this is okay to do it this way. I don't need to adhere to a certain kind of model or image of what I think a poem should be. And I certainly don't adhere to those models now.
I don't know if you know Michael Keith. He writes prose, little prose pieces that are kind of a little bizarre and all that in the same sense.
Yeah.
I think he's a big, he definitely is a big table publishing.
Yes, right, yeah.
So how has it been, with working with these small presses? You work with one. And,
It's been great. I mean, for me, it's been an honor to be published, and working with Robin was fabulous, and working with Michael is great, and Gloria has been just wonderful. So I have no complaints, and I feel incredibly lucky. So I just, every day I think that's an amazing thing. I get to have a book or another chapbook, and and I've been, editors have been really kind to me. So.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, and this is asked in the New York Times book review, so I figured it's a damn good question.
Okay.
It's very simple, but why should people read your work?
I think to get a perspective that is a little simultaneously surreal and real, that is kind of a democratic voice, that it's a voice of the popular world. I think the characters and speakers have a view that from which we can learn some things, both as positive models and not so positive models. And I think also for me it's important to have fun when I write. I hope some of that comes through in what I write. And what's most important to me is that there's a combination of real seriousness but also playfulness, and that's possible in this form for me, and that's what I strive for.
You don't brood in some shack out in the Cape and drink whiskey excessively. None of that stuff.
No, I don't.
What kind of writer are you? I mean,
I know. I don't fit the mold. No.
But tell us about the new books that you're working on. What are they? The new book.
The new book that's coming out.
Don't you have?
I have. Yeah, I have 3 actually. There's one coming out in February from Nixis Mate called Detonations, which is primarily prose poems. There's a few lineated poems, and they're just an array of things of characters and issues that they deal with, and actually the books are quite similar in that theme, but I think they're also unique, kind of compilation of different perspectives in each of the books. And so then from Trivina Barva, there's the Momentary Turbulence will be coming out this year, and then I think the following year, Word in Edgewise, and they're both primarily prose poems.
And it's free verse, right? You never work with rhyme?
No.
No, why not?
It doesn't sound good to me.
It doesn't sound good to you. You get into those June Moon type of things.
No.
And you don't like the structure of having structure like that?
I'm not smart enough to follow the structure.
Yeah. So you just like to free write and things like that.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, we all know that what Frost said about free verse, it's playing tennis without a net.
Right, oh, net, exactly. And then, some of the poems I've started with, I've done lineated poems, and then it just makes sense to move them into a paragraph form. It's not, I understand the importance of the line. I get that. I respect it. I see it in other people's work who do it so well. But for me, it's the sentence, not the line, that's more powerful. And it's juxtaposing these sentences that gives the poems as much power as I can give them. Whereas I think I just don't see that in lineated poetry as much. Don't get me wrong, there are beautiful things written, there's incredible work being done, but it's not what I feel most comfortable in.
Okay, you got to be with you're comfortable in. So you have quite a bit of time to read from your work. You got about 13 minutes. So
Okay. Well, let me read a few, and then you can chat some more, or I can continue to read.
I never have any problems with poets reading their work. They always want to.
Great. This poem is called Ventriloquists on the Radio. Listening to ventriloquists on the radio. They're talking at me. You may have heard them already. Sometimes it's good to travel. You get messages when you travel. It's mostly accidental. I was on an airplane once, and before we took off, they said, "Put on your oxygen mask before helping others." I like that, even though I don't like things that cover my face. During the flight, I practiced my secret language, mainly the vowels. It's best to practice the vowels when you're awake. It's easy on an airplane because everyone's facing in one direction, even the children. I watched a movie about Japan. Many people were upset to learn that the emperor isn't divine. That surprised me too, but I suppose nobody's perfect, even in Japan. Sometimes I hear things that aren't there. It's like throwing your voice. If you're not careful, you can become confused. The words come out of someone else's mouth, and you're a story in someone else's head. Of course, it's pretty much the same story you hear every time. The beginning and the end are exactly the same. It's like a miracle. There's just no words for it, like an echo of a voice that isn't there, even when everyone is listening. Because whenever anyone talks to me, I know they aren't.
Seems like a rambling stream of consciousness that one would have, on a plane or in transit or something like that.
Yeah. I think it's the inner voice of this character, of this speaker, and some of it is a little unusual, and some of it is.
But not. But it is the everyman, though. I mean, all those concerns that you spoke about in that poem, I think I could relate to, and to a certain degree.
Good.
Yeah.
This is called After the Movie. Just finished yelling fire in the jam-packed Cineplex when Peaches said, "What are you trying to tell me, Eddie?" Of course, I wasn't at liberty to divulge trade secrets of the opposite sex, so I said, "I prefer it when my stove cooks itself." While we were being escorted to the parking lot, Peaches reminded me that there's nothing more beautiful than a fat man who can dance. But the angry satellites continued to circle overhead like a pack of jackals orbiting a nest of fire ants. Nothing good happens when your back is turned. I was just about to take a swig from my weekday flask when I remembered a lawyer may not assist a client with a crime. So I asked Peaches if after we threw the bodies into a shallow grave, she would mind lighting them on fire. She didn't say no right away. "Hurry up," I said. "We haven't got all night."
That's heartwarming. Yeah. Something for the kids around Christmas. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't do seasonal poetry, sadly. This poem is called Fate.
Fate?
Fate. I've forgotten my past lives. Like a blind black dog wandering a night highway, I'm making the best of it. Without its water, a sea would be a desert. Even bad dreams can answer good questions. I never let a disaster go to waste. A river of voltage flows inside me. Whatever happens, happens for a reason. Each time I aim with my eyes closed, I hit the bullseye. I make it look like an accident. The next poem is called If the Shoe Fits. I work hard all day like a snake. My bankruptcy attorney says it's futile to reinvent the hula hoop, but I tell him it's all part of my journey. I mean, Why do we get only one life wedged between two eternities? I'm sure there's a perfectly reasonable explanation, although I haven't been asked to sign the guest register yet. Thankfully, they found that all those anonymous deaths at the Census Bureau were unrelated to terrorism. I didn't take it personally. I'm sure it's a lot harder than it looks. Last night, I barely got an ounce of sleep. Those damn rabbits snored louder than a fleet of crop dusters dangling over a buckwheat farm, but what can you expect if you grow nothing but carrots? After the government's scheduled welfare executions, I'm planning to rename myself, just to be on the safe side. You know what they say, in a violent breeze, the sky is always filthy quiet. Besides, I wouldn't be caught dead wearing my stilts in a big and tall store, certainly not before I spell-checked my cookie tattoos. Those 3D food printers are a lot prettier than they taste. Say, you don't think these slippers make me look fat, do you? Ever since the amputations, I can barely get them on.
I like, sometimes your metaphors are a little odd, like it works as hard as a snake. I wouldn't think of that initially.
Yeah. This is called Desert Motel. Today is fever bright, no wind. Justine says I should slow down, but I speed up. I like to get to things before they get to me. She's been searching for her birth mother. It takes her about 2 years to get this far. I tell her she probably won't recognize her. She laughs and says, "Curtis, not every day has to be a maybe." Everybody wants something real. When we get to Vegas, she opens her purse and pulls out a birth certificate. It's a single page, and on the back it has tiny ink footprints and a large thumbprint. The motel is pink and white, and our room is cold as a skating rink. I sit on the end of one of the twin beds, drinking a cherry Coke. Outside, it's 102 in the shade. The pool is filled with screaming children. You can hear them having fun or something like it. I remind Justine there are more plastic flamingos in the world than real ones.
That's a nice last line. I remember in Newton, just, I don't know why I'm thinking plastic flamingos, but in Newton, there was an outcry because a woman had a plastic flamingo on her lawn.
Really?
And in reaction to that, she had 100 of them on the lawn, you know. That's, you know, there's a...
I actually read somewhere, I don't know how that is known, that there are more plastic flamingos have been produced than real ones in the world.
Yeah.
This poem is called Relax. The sign in the window says ladies' dresses 70% off. Can't be sure whether that's an invitation or a warning. Like God, the cause of the incident is still under investigation. Stop me if you've heard this story so many times you can't remember what it's about. Administratively speaking, you'd do the same if I were in your shoes. With a deluxe nightmare, it comes at no extra cost, excluding normal wear and tear. I may look like I'm hiding in a drowning, but I've learned you can have an excellent memory if you don't spend all your time trying to forget. It's as easy as an electrocution in standing water. It's such a beautiful night tonight, don't you think? The breeze, cool and slow, your eyes, dark, dead stars. With my hand in yours, I feel relaxed as an axe lounging in blue sequined moonlight, the throat of the moon pulled out like a drawer.
The throat of the moon pulled out like a drawer.
This poem is called Cotton Candy Pink, and it appeared in the American Journal of Poetry last year.
I've been hearing a lot about that journal. How long has it been around?
The editor, Robert Nazarene, has been around a long time and used to do a magazine called Margie.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And which I wasn't familiar with. I discovered him when he started. And I think the American Journal of Poetry has been around for about 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
And they're biannual, twice a year. And they, it's exclusively internet-based. So he has a large number of really, excluding myself, of course, really fine poets. And it's pretty impressive. You know, it's just
Yeah.
amazing stuff.
Yeah, his name pop up all the time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, he's able to also publish a lot of folks because it's just on the internet,
yeah.
you know. Cotton Candy Pink. At the laundromat, I can hold my breath for half an hour. I don't know where one thought ends and another begins. Felicia has different colored wigs. One is cotton candy pink. Once, she took me dancing. It was my birthday. The music was everywhere, but I noticed my thoughts were accelerating like it was too late. Some of them were talking in a secret language. Sometimes thoughts are like other people. They have their lives while I'm having mine. No big deal. At the dance, it was a nice cross-section of people. They were all wearing clothes and shoes. Felicia said, "Ray, you look sad as a mall Santa." I told her I liked to dance, but I had some things I needed to do. A Sly and the Family Stone tribute band was taking everybody higher, so I went outside. In the dark, the city crouched down, and the buildings looked like a crowd of appliances. It was hot, and I heard sirens in the distance. I wondered what was going on in the sky. They say when you sleep, your muscles become paralyzed to stop you from acting out your dreams. I wanted to go back inside to dance, but the stars seemed lost, like they were moving to somewhere new and needed someone to say farewell. Felicia came outside to smoke a cigarette, and she said, "Oh, here you are," like I was a surprise. Tonight, she wore a flame-red wig. There were a lot of things I could have said when her two sleeping kids died in that Christmas blaze, but I didn't. I'm still not sure what color her real hair is.
You have time for one really short one.
Okay, let's see if I have
Very
a
short
really
one.
short one. I'm spending it all turning pages. See if I can read this one really quick. Hot Metal.
Got a minute. Yeah.
Darla is mean as bees. I'd rather be eaten alive. I told her I had no choice. It was either kill or be killed. I told you nobody should carry that many knives, she sneered. We got in the car and drove toward Billy and Raven's place. It wasn't even music on the radio. As we crossed the Hot Metal Bridge, the Monongahela looked black as a cobra in a tar pit. Nobody jumps from there, not high enough. Ever since the amputation, she's had a chip on her shoulder. Like it was my fault, she needled up her arm. I swerved so we wouldn't run over a cat carcass on East Carson. There wasn't much of it left. As if she was throwing away her Burger King wrapper, Darla threw my works out of the car window and smirked. "You know what I'm saying, Curtis?" I swear, the damn car wasn't even stolen.
Thank you very much for appearing on Poet to Poet.
Thanks very much for having me.
To Writer. I hope you'll join us, and the next show is in December. Thank you very much,